Ministry Network, encouraging all to say yes to Jesus Christ.
Tonight on the Tactical Catholic, what does faith have to do with science? Are they at war? Does the church fear science? And what in the world is psychophysics? Tonight we welcome our good friend George Boggs to discuss these topics and whatever else we decide. It all starts right now.
Hey everybody, Tactical Catholic, and tonight is episode 31. Now, if you have been watching every week, you will know that I never finished episode 30. I completely lost my internet signal.
Yeah.
And so that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I went back to my internet service provider, who shall not be named, AT&T, and went and I told them that they needed to fix my problem. And they were very kind and very gracious, and they fixed my situation with great class and kindness. And so I believe we shouldn't have any issues with bandwidth this evening. My bandwidth is effectively doubled, so I think we're in good shape.
Great.
So we'll catch the rest of those practical things you can do to evangelize in your parish. We'll catch those on a later episode. But tonight, episode 31, we're going in a completely different direction. So I hope that that y'all be excited about what we're going to talk about tonight. But I always have to ask, Kent, how are you doing?
I am doing fine. We'll be talking about the Disney stuff next week or so, but
we'll have to get some Disney
we
talk
got a lot of Disney talk. I think we could even do a blog video of that, just a separate. But yeah, I'm doing well. The Cavs won last night.
Didn't you lose a player?
We've lost a couple players, so yeah, it's been a little stressful. But we're 2 games away from our first championship in 51 years. Come on, Cavs! But that's about it. How are you doing, Andy?
Well, I'm doing good. I'd be doing better if the Grizzlies were in the finals against the Cavs instead of the Golden State Warriors, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about basketball. I just wanted to see how the Cavs were doing. And, what has LeBron said anything to you today? Is he feeling okay? Feeling good?
Yeah, he sounds like, from the interview, he sounds okay. I think we'll hopefully get this game. I'm hoping, but I can't promise anything. But, man, It would be great.
It is what it is.
Yep.
All right. Well, tonight we are going to discuss faith and science and whatever else happens to come into our minds. And for that, I have got a specialist. I've got my friend George Boggs, and he is a psychophysicist. And he is also one of my best friends. So welcome to the show, George Boggs.
Thank you. It's this is the first podcast I've ever done. So technically it's been an interesting process, but
I'm sure.
Me.
You're most welcome. Now, just for the people keeping score at home, tell them what a psychophysicist is.
Well, psychophysicists, there are a lot of different kind of physicists. There are astrophysicists who look up into the sky, and there are particle physicists who smash atoms into each other. And a psychophysicist is a physicist who is interested in the physics of how we understand the universe around us. So basically, my own specialty or expertise in that area, at least when I started out in my career, was a field called psychoacoustics. And what we did in psychoacoustics was we modeled the human auditory system like you would model a device, a listening device that you found on the beach, and try to figure out how it works. So there's a lot of mathematical modeling involved in that kind of thing. And in fact, the very first scientist in history, Bacon, Roger Bacon, who, by the way, was Catholic, was interested in psychophysics from the perspective of understanding the eyeball, because that is still, although we know a lot more about it than we did when Roger was alive, that's still a big mystery.
And I guess back then he didn't know. Doesn't the eyeball see things upside down or something?
Yeah, well, he couldn't know that because he didn't have any way to see what they saw in the retina, and they didn't have the complete understanding of lenses like they do today. But the eyeball has always fascinated people, I guess, from the beginning of time. I mean, vision is a pretty miraculous thing that we take for granted every time we open our eyes in the morning. And scientists have wondered about that for a long time. As a matter of fact, the guy Paley, who kind of kicked off the whole intelligent design thing, used the eyeball as an example of something that, in his view, had to have been designed.
It makes sense. I mean, it's super complex. Well, whenever I think about eyeballs and technology, like understanding vision, as a guy who's been wearing specs since he was 4, sight's pretty important. I would love to have, bionic man vision so that I could telescope and all the other things that Steve Austin had, but it is what it is. What I was thinking about though, they said that in the image of Guadalupe that was on the tilma.
Yes.
That if you look in the in the eyes,
yes,
you see the bishop and the other people that were in the room, but they're upside down.
Yes, I have read that too. I mean, I've never seen it. I'd love to see it at some time. I'm sure they wouldn't let me close enough to it to confirm that. Not that I really need to confirm it. I'm sure it's true if they say it's true. But there was frankly no way anybody in that era in that country could have known that.
And that was the 16th century, right? No one would have even known about that.
No,
the way that would even work.
No, I mean, there was no way at that point in time to really determine, because if you look in somebody's eyeball, with like a little light they use at the ophthalmologist or optometrist, you can't see the image.
Yeah.
All you see really are the rods and cones in the retina of the eye. You just see cells and blood vessels and so forth. So there really isn't any way that anyone in that era would have known that the type of lens that is in your eyeball, admits light into your eyeball, is the type of lens that inverts images.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is.
This. I guess I was listening to a podcast actually today, and I'll give it a plug. It's Catholic Stuff You Should Know. It's actually a couple of priests out in Colorado in the Archdiocese of Denver, and these guys were talking about, and they kind of got my ire up because they were talking about comic books in a not so positive light. But I think that they brought out a very valid point that this world seems to be, I say they've always been doing this, but it would appear that the world is really trying hard to find a substitute for God, and in particular, a substitute for relationship with God. So they put these things on pedestals as their guides. And even in the movie, the Avengers, the second Avengers movie, that's one thing that Tony Stark's always trying to do is what technological advancement can we do that's going to keep the world safe, or that's going to, even in the Captain America Winter Soldier, the algorithm that's somehow going to predict crime so that we can protect ourselves.
Right.
But ultimately there has to be faith and there has to be a trust. And I don't think that science was ever intended to be a substitute for God. But I think some people are trying to make it behave that way. What do you think?
Well, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that people don't really acknowledge how much faith they have in science. For example, the number of people I mean, everybody believes that the Earth rotates, right? Everybody believes that.
Yeah.
But the number of people who have actually ever put that to an experimental test is vanishingly small. I mean, there are places where it is done, like you can go into I think it's the Museum of Science in Boston, and they have a pendulum there that will illustrate the rotation of the Earth. But most of the things that people know about science, they don't know from a scientific perspective. They just know it and believe it because somebody told them it was true. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, it's really no different than having a theologian tell you something is true. You know, you're just taking the word of a person that you consider to be an authority figure when it comes right down to it. And the interesting thing about science is that the further the more we know, the deeper the mysteries get. Mm-hmm. It's not like we learn more and more and we can see the end. It's that the light at the tunnel is not approaching; it's receding.
Yeah.
In fact, we used to have an old saying in graduate school is when you get a PhD, and I think this is true in any area of science, you learn more and more about less and less till you know everything about nothing. So when you get down to really how we'll say the inner ear works, mm-hmm. It's a complete mystery. No one knows. And we've been studying that for, a long time.
The further we get down the rabbit hole, the further we see the rabbit hole actually goes. There's always more to discover.
Right. And consider that, for example, people put a lot of weight on cosmology and astrophysics, mm-hmm. But consider that the only thing we know about the universe out there beyond the moon, because that's really as far as human beings have gone. Mm-hmm. When you talk about galaxies and stars, you are talking about information that we collect. The only information that comes from there is this rainfall of photons, is this light. Mm-hmm. And so it's like standing out in the rain and using the way the rain is falling on you to figure out what makes clouds the way they are. And it's a challenging thing. I mean, I'm not criticizing these people. They've got they have a challenging job. But when you think of something that is we'll say something fairly close, like 10,000 light years away, nobody's ever going there. Mm-hmm. Everything you see happened 10,000 years ago.
Right, because the light is just now reaching our vision.
So our knowledge of science, what impresses people about science really is the ability to make gizmos. There was a time that the astrologers in Egypt knew very well the positions of the stars that would predict the flooding of the Nile. So they would tell the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh would walk out on his portico with all his people gathered after they told him, the Nile's going to flood in 2 weeks. And the Pharaoh would say, "My people, I am looking into the future, and the Nile is going to flood in 2 weeks." And sure enough, it did. So that made him a god. That's one thing.
Right.
Do to human beings.
Isn't there a saying like, I lost my audio. Can you hear me?
Now I can. I didn't hear anything after saying.
Wow. I thought there's a saying, and maybe you said it when my audio cut out, that like something like any technology could be almost indistinguishable from magic?
Oh yeah, well, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I mean, for example, you could go down into the Amazon jungle as an anthropologist, and if you found one of those primitive tribes, you could show them a Bic lighter, and they would they would be astonished. It would be magic.
Oh, right. When it's actually a very, very simple device, right? But
I mean, you can buy them for $1 at 7-Eleven.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I wonder, and this is the thing that's been kind of wrapped my brain for the past, what time is it? 9 o'clock, 9:17, for the past 5 hours, and it is that perhaps people have created or allowed these other gods to fill the gap that God desires to fill, because the other gods that they have don't ask anything of them. A movie's not going to ask anything of you. I mean, it'll move you, it'll make you feel good, make you laugh, make you cry, but at the end of the day, you can turn it off. Whereas a relationship with God requires something. It's going to cost you something. You're going to have to, if you're going to have a relationship with someone, it requires effort. It requires something. And most people would rather just turn it off. I think that's the draw of a lot of things today. But that's what's been in my brain, is maybe why people are trying to turn away from God and find something, some kind of a substitute. But I still even think that science is enough of a pointer to something bigger than ourselves, and not just in a mythological, impersonal kind of way, but in intelligence.
Well, I think two points you made. The first one I'll address by saying, it is my personal witness. There was, for most of my life, and I think you've probably heard me say this before in other contexts, but for most of my adult life, I didn't even like Christians. I didn't want to be around them. And quite frankly, the reason for that is, and I think the reason that a lot of people feel that way is just like you pointed out, a relationship with God comes with baggage.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a relationship with God and just behave any way you want to. And if you want to behave any way that you want to, human mind is, if anything, an incredible rationalization machine. And so you can rationalize yourself into just about any position. On the second point that you made, and it was, remind me, because I kind of got off on that rabbit trail.
About trying to find a substitute for their faith, but that even science kind of should point us to some kind of intelligence.
One of the things that bothers me about
was that the point?
Yeah, that was exactly the point. One of the things that bothers me about people who say they don't believe in miracles and things like that. How can you not believe in miracles? I mean, your very existence is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at how this whole shebang is put together, all these subatomic particles and so forth, that's staggering in its miraculousness. And to say that, it just happened because, the wind was blowing out the east one day, I mean, it's crazy. So there is that, and I think that people love to, I will never forget our former priest, Father Parham, said something that really struck me very deeply. It struck a very deep chord in me, and he reminded us one day in his homily that it was just a very few number of days after God had parted the Red Sea. And whether or not that even happened historically or not is irrelevant. The message of the Bible is about a relationship with God. And just a few days after God parted the Red Sea, the Israelites were building a golden calf. So, miracles are not the path to belief. Even the Israelites, after seeing what had to have been one of the most astonishing miracles that ever occurred on the planet, just a few days later, were worshiping a golden idol.
Exactly. That it didn't have and I don't think that was the purpose.
Right.
Red Sea wasn't to make the Israelites believe.
Right. And so we burn for that. We burn for something to believe in. We burn for a harbor in the storm. And, I keep reading this stuff about transhumanism, that technology is going to save us because we're all going to become cyborgs that are immortal. And it's not going to.
No, and some people say that Walt Disney tried to do that he froze his head.
That wouldn't surprise me in the very least. Actually, yeah. I think a lot of people do.
Well, and Ted Williams did that. I think didn't he have his body cryogenically frozen?
I don't know. I mean, one of the criticisms of Christianity that I've heard and strikes me as weird since I became Christian, since I had my conversion, is that Christians become Christians because they're afraid of dying. Why would you be afraid of dying if you're a Christian?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not the Christians that are afraid of dying. It's people like Christopher Hitchens that as far as he knew, when he died, the lights went off. That was it. There was no more him anymore. There was no substance that you could call Christopher Hitchens. There was just a piece of meat there on the gurney.
Mm-hmm. And yet some people are. There's nothing if they believe in some kind of. If they don't believe in anything after death, then why be afraid of it?
Also, that is the perfect excuse for sin.
Like the Epicureans.
Yeah, exactly. One of the greatest poetic works of all time was written by a guy from Persia, Iran. I think it was before Mohammed. I'm not sure. I forget his name, but it's where the verses a loaf of bread, a jug of wine, and thou. And what it is, it's a whole poem, a book-length poem about when you're dead, you're dead. So you better make the most of it that you can right now. And if that's what you believe, then your interactions with other people are totally self-focused.
Yeah. Now that's I think we're seeing that same thing today.
We are. I agree.
But I don't think now. If I can use a kind of a strange illustration, my kids like to watch these movies called VeggieTales, and they've been around for decades, a couple of decades anyway. I used to sell them in a bookstore. But there was a story about a blueberry that just wanted to keep getting stuff. And in the end, all the stuff that she wanted never really satisfied her. She wasn't happy. Meanwhile, some other vegetable out in the woods was completely satisfied with a very meager existence, or what comparatively speaking would be a very meager existence. And I think it's not so much about stuff. I think stuff is just an example of things we try to cram into our life to fill the void. Where the void really, God desires relationship. We're created for relationship with God and relationship with one another. But our mentality is, no, let me fill it with stuff, with things, and that consumerist mentality that you are a commodity for my use.
Right.
I think That's the attraction of pornography. One of the attractions of pornography, and the people that hoard, it's stuff. It's just stuff, not for the purpose of usage, even for practical use, but for the purpose of accumulating for the sake of accumulating.
Exactly. Well, if that word relationship is so important. The Trinity, as Catholics, we know the Trinity is relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the entire cosmos reflects that relationship. An atom is a relationship among particles. And a chemical compound is a relationship among atoms.
Mm-hmm.
And a macro thing like a rock or an engine or something like that is a relationship among chemical entities, and so are we. And you even go out to the stars, and solar systems are a relationship between a central star or stars and planets, and galaxies are relationships of stars, and there are even super galaxies. So when you start with this Trinity being a relationship, the entire universe is in relationship. And the only thing in creation that we know of, and I mean all creation, cosmos creation, the only thing in creation that we know of that violates God's laws are human beings. You will never see a planet leave its orbit. You will never see a moon abandon its planet, like some spouses do their families.
Mm-hmm.
That just doesn't happen except with human beings, and we have this tendency. It's perfectly described in Genesis. I mean, the insights there are incredibly deep. That it is all about us, and so we even have these things I like to call first world problems.
Yeah.
There are people on this planet who live on less than $1 a day.
Mm-hmm.
There are people in New York, particularly coddled academics, whose the biggest problem that they can think about is man spreading on the subway. Mm-hmm. When you sit with your legs apart, mm-hmm. because women don't do that, and that's clearly a first world problem. I mean, that's not something that occupies the mind of someone who lives in Guinea.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Who we're not grateful for. How many people in the world get in the morning and have an unlimited hot running water? Not many.
No. So I guess, it sounds like I'm on the right trail then. I guess, you think about, does that mean that God wants us to all go live in caves somewhere and have nothing because that's the only way that we can have an existence? I don't think that's the answer either. But I think it has to start with not just about stuff, about material goods, but it seems to me like it has to start with selflessness.
Well, I completely agree, Andy. I mean, look at it like this. Well, there would be no science if it were not for the church.
Mm.
When Christ said, "You will do greater things than this," we do, and do greater things than he did. For example, yes, he fed the 5,000. Mm-hmm. The Catholic Church feeds millions of people every day, and the next morning the baskets are refilled, and that all comes from the widow's mite.
Right, exactly.
It's a miracle. So one of the things that we need to be focusing on as Catholics, and this is one of the reasons that I'm so interested in science and faith, is that we need to be better apologists, much better apologists. Christ himself, when he sent out his apostles, said, You must be wise as a viper and gentle as a dove.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we need to be.
Well, that makes me think about something else here. Now, let me post this one by you. Okay, so, and I can't remember the name of the saint.
I'm sorry,
had this
as a serpent and gentle as a dove.
A viper is a serpent. So I can't remember the saint that came up with this prayer, but basically the prayer was a prayer of what I'll call, it's the litany of humility. I think that's what it's called. So, basically from the desire of being loved, from the desire to be recognized, from the desire, to be right, this whole list of things, the prayer is to ask for deliverance. And when I see science being done right, it is not science being done so that I can get published or so that I can get a grant. It is so I can do something to better humanity or to
exactly.
That when and I think you could probably explain it so much better, but part of the reason why Christians, and I'm thinking of those monks you talked about in the so-called Dark Ages, the reasons a lot of them became engineers was because they wanted to find a way to increase work without using slavery.
Right. Andy, one of the things that we need much more of in science, without God, science has no moral compass. So, people insist on the freedom to study anything they want. And today, we can harvest eggs from an aborted female fetus and fertilize those eggs in vitro, in petri dish. And so that you can have a child that is born, you can have a child whose mother was never born.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that knowledge of embryology and cell biology should be left behind, but there are certain questions. One of the most regrettable things that Albert Einstein ever did in his life was participate in the Manhattan Project, because it was totally about killing people. Now, nuclear power can bring electricity to places where people don't even have decent drinking water, but it can also wipe out entire cities. And so as scientists, I wish I had known this 40 years ago. Scientists themselves need to develop that moral compass to understand, am I doing something that is going to benefit my fellow man? Or am I doing something that is so I can get my next grant proposal so that I can make an excuse to go to a conference in Monaco and give a paper?
Well, and now I have heard this, and I think this is part of the rhetoric. Now it sounds political, but I think scientists could also use the same thing. Well, for that matter, people of faith could use this as well to somehow justify their actions that we would consider to be sinful and unethical, but to say that it's somehow for the betterment of mankind. Margaret Sanger would have advocated the eradication of African Americans because she was a racist and because she thought that through her eugenics program that she could increase, with contraception and abortion, just decrease their population. But she would think that somehow that population control was for the betterment of mankind, which is ridiculous.
Well, you can justify it on that basis. You certainly can. I mean, Hitler did, frankly. But I'm not saying that Margaret Sanger necessarily leads to Hitler. I mean, there are a lot of arguments around that. But what I am saying is without that moral compass, that every human being has dignity. Once you realize that, you know that treating people like cattle doesn't confer on them the dignity that they have innately because they are children of God. And so that allows you to kill people. That's why the atheist regimes, the Maoists and the Stalinists were able to murder millions of people and justify it, because it was in the political best interest of the people. But once you have that moral compass, once you say that every person has a right to life, every person has a dignity, the dignity of man, then you can't get away with that any longer.
Right. Well, if they dehumanize those of whom they wish to eradicate, whether it is an unborn child or a Jew in Nazi Germany or Jew in Poland, whoever, when these people wanted to wipe out people. I mean, even the genocides in Africa, right? It is at some point even coming down to tribe, that they somehow justify that by dehumanizing the person they wish to eradicate. And right. I think a consumerist mentality does the same thing. Utilitarianism does the same thing. It reduces you to a number or an image on a web page or a commodity.
Utilitarianism. I mean, Jeremy Bentham and his utilitarianism is one of the most unfortunate schools of thought that has ever entered the human vocabulary. People do not the very idea that you can maximize the total amount of happiness or utility. He even tried to come up with a calculus for that. All that is, I mean, you just go back to chapter 3 in Genesis, you shall be as gods, and nothing has changed.
Right. And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that's the lure that you can have, with science, with technology, with whatever you want to insert into that, you can have exactly what you want with no consequences.
Right. And the scientists, very frankly, are in many ways the new priesthood.
It would seem that people are holding them to that, them and celebrities.
Exactly, they are. The amount of faith that goes into what people who call themselves scientists say is frightening, actually. I know those people. I know those people. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
I used to be one of them.
Yeah. But there's so much that it properly formed that scientists and science do to not just benefit people, but to help us, I would say, even to further and better understand our universe and how we even see God.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of the seminar that you did for us and the things that you talk about in RCIA, and just the reason why the church came up with hospitals and universities and schools and all the things that we did. And those are just a few moments in history, but then to start to look at what we can see through our Hubble Space Telescope, what we can see with the satellite probes that we're sending throughout the galaxy. We're seeing amazing things that, to me, that's that wonder and awe. And this is just the natural world. We're all to even go inside, to look at the human body and the intricacies of the cells on the tips of my not so clean fingers. And it's amazing. It's baffling. And it humbles me as a human being to look at all this and think that there's I can't fathom the number of probability that it would take for this beautiful specimen you see in front of you to appear randomly.
Well, really, neither can anybody else. The only way people get away with that is because they rely on infinities.
Mm.
And, quite frankly, to a physicist, infinities are anathema. There are no infinities in the universe. The universe is not infinite. The universe is bounded. Everything in the universe is bounded. Infinity is imaginary. It's a concept. It's a concept of the human mind that cannot possibly exist in nature. Nothing is infinite. And so the only way they get away with that is kind of the infinite number of monkeys typing on the infinite number of typewriters for an infinite amount of time. One of them is eventually going to type out all the works of Shakespeare. And that's true. But, that's never going to happen in a real universe where if you drop something, it falls on your foot.
Mm-hmm. But because you're right, because the universe in which we live has Shakespeare, has Da Vinci, right, has Einstein, all in one universe, all in one sphere of existence. And all these things have happened. And for them to all randomly occur in this one particular, to me, that would require more faith than I've got as a Christian.
Well, one of the more interesting things that I hear people say these days, and they're doing a lot of neuro research, and there's a big argument right now that there's no such thing as free will. And the people who make that argument, if there is no such thing as free will, every single behavior, Andy, that you emit is the product of something that has happened to you previously. And it's deterministic. Okay. If I could go back and add up all the things that have happened to you since birth, if you have no free will, then I can tell you what you're going to do 2 minutes from now. I can tell you what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Because you have no free will. You don't have any volition. Nothing. You don't have any control over it. And that they say your control is just an illusion. And my question to them is, if what you say is true, and you really believe that, why should I listen to you? Because you haven't discovered anything. What you're spouting out right now, these words, they're just a sum total of everything that's ever happened to you in your life. You haven't come up with anything new or radical. It's no different than listening to a wooden box of silverware roll down the steps.
There's no difference in the value, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the silverware doesn't have any control over the noise. Mm-hmm. And so if what they say is true, then that precludes the necessity or even desire to listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
They don't believe that about themselves.
Well, of course not. No, what they have to say is absolutely the most important thing ever.
What they want to do is use that as an excuse to do just what you said, and that is to treat human beings like cattle and tell them what to do and where to go and when to do that.
Right.
It's all about power. It was all about power from the beginning.
Yeah, that seems like that is the attraction. And again, see, this is because everything that you say and do is some product of the sum total of everything that's ever happened to you. I knew you were going to say that because I was thinking about that very thing in adoration this evening when I was meditating on the incarnation. Because if the fall was all about power, you shall be like God, knowing right from wrong. And yet Jesus is God. And, let's think of not hypothetical, but kind of a figurative situation in which Jesus had everything laid out in front of him, everything, he saw all of eternity. These human beings, if you want to come down to earth, and I'm borrowing a term from these priests I listened to today, then come back as a centaur, come back as a unicorn, something that they've never seen before, something amazing, something powerful, but don't come back as a human being. So Jesus, the Bible tells us that Jesus emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, right? So Jesus still had all the prerogative, all the ability to do anything he wanted. Come down off the cross if you're the Son of God, and then we'll believe you. He could have. He could have called down lightning. He could have snapped his fingers. He could have not even come down to heaven and willed all of us into heaven and all of creation to be redeemed. But he chose the path of meekness, which is not powerlessness, but it's the path of humility and meekness, that though he had all of that power, he came to relate. He came to sacrifice and ultimately give everything. There was nothing left of him from the cross. He emptied his entire life force on the cross, and the spear finished the job. And then he turned around after his resurrection and said, follow me, do exactly what I just did. Give yourself for other people. And there is no other religion on the face of this earth, apart from the Judeo-Christian faith, that says sacrifice and relationship are the way to go. Everything else is power.
I have looked into a lot of religions. I did a lot of religious shopping around when I was in college, and along with a lot of pharmaceutical shopping around. And there really is no religion like Judeo-Christianity. It is unique as far as I know. I mean, there might be some shaman out there in, I don't know, Wazza Wazza land who has a religion that's similar to it. But the interesting thing is about Judeo-Christianity. One of the things that I actually, since my conversion convinced me is true, is totally counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, exactly.
I mean, no one I have ever known would have come up with the Sermon on the Mount.
No.
Don't think like that. It's like the prophet Isaiah, when God in some way said to him, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. Think of the people he picked. Guys like Moses, who was on the lam for murder, a stutterer. I mean, the people he picked, they were all humble. Mm-hmm. When I was a Protestant, we never thought about Mary.
Right.
I'm not criticizing my Methodist friends, which is we didn't, and we just figured she was some girl. Well, God doesn't just pick some girl to bear his son. She is special, and she was special in her humility, not in her greatness. If he wanted greatness, he could have picked a queen.
Sure, exactly. Some kind of a royal birth, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So it's amazing, and that's, to me, that's where my thoughts were leading today when I think about science. To me, science properly done makes us humble, because we stand in awe of the grandeur and majesty of all that's around us. And all we're doing with our scientific method is just trying to observe how everything works. It's amazing. It's beautiful. But it's not so that I can become more powerful, somehow exert influence over you. But through this, doctors find out ways that they can help more people. Agriculture, they figure out ways that they can increase crop yields to feed more people. Is that our human population, at least in some parts of the world, continues to grow. So, I don't know.
Well, human beings in our brokenness, we can corrupt anything. To me, science is like reading the Bible. Reading the Bible is an encounter with the mind of God, and understanding how the universe works is an encounter with the mind of God. I mean, he created it. The Trinity is a relationship. Atoms are a relationship. Molecules are a relationship. And so, understanding that is understanding the mind of God, because he looked at it and he said, wow, this is cool. He was good. It was good. And so human beings can corrupt reading the Bible. There are no shortage of people who are very familiar with the Bible who are totally corrupt.
Oh, sure.
Okay, and use that to exploit people, in a greedy and gainful, sinful way. And so science is no different. And it's sad, really.
Yeah, it is. And I apologize. I have to mute my microphone every now and then because my kids keep turning the TV volume up. I whatever.
It's childhood. Everything must be loud.
Oh, they're having a hoot in there. So I guess, and I don't have the chat, so I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Ken, am I missing some questions in the chat for me or George? Probably for
not
George.
to,
I don't know.
everybody's just watching and listening. I didn't have any.
Well, let me take a couple of seconds.
Do I hear snoring out there?
Let me take a second to point this out, but especially for the people that listen to us via podcast. If you're listening to us on Stitcher or iTunes or whatever direct audio feed that you have, I want to tell you that we do appreciate your questions. I've got some really cool feedback while we were on leave the last couple of weeks. Some really cool questions from some of you out here. And while I'm respecting your anonymity, I really appreciate the feedback and thank you for the suggestions. I know you're listening. But if you ever have questions, we have our guest, George, is here tonight, and the chat is obviously how to talk to him now. But if you have questions for later for any of these things that we talk about, you always have our contact information at the bottom of the screen for the live. But you can also go to fiatministrynetwork.tv and you can contact us that way, or you can go to my website, tacticalcatholic.com, and you can reach us that way because we want to hear from you. By the way, I mentioned earlier, and I'm moving in close to my microphone, you are threatened with mortal sin if you do not go to iTunes and leave a review. It does not have to be a positive review, but you need to leave a review or your soul could possibly be in jeopardy. I'm just saying that. So,
however, though, I mean, the payment of some indulgences.
Did I mention we have sponsors? So, well, we do appreciate our sponsors, and I did want to take another second here just to thank our sponsors. Bishop Sheen Rosaries, one of our most recent sponsors. We do have their banner there on the website. We talked about selflessness. One of the things that impresses me about Bishop Sheen Rosaries, in addition to using paracord, which I think is awesome, Bishop Sheen Rosary uses the proceeds from their rosaries to help school children in Africa. They feed and educate children using the proceeds from these rosaries. So, if you're appreciating the shows that come on the Fiat Ministry Network, we don't get a dime. That's not why we do this. I do it because I'm a guy that likes talking to other people and trying to grow in his own faith. But if you like the things that you're hearing, go to our sponsors and tell them thanks, because they are the ones that make it possible for us to stay on the air. They really do. So, I appreciate our sponsors. Catholic Company is another one, and you've heard from them for a while. Bishop Sheen is our new sponsor. So take a minute to thank our sponsors and then go leave feedback on iTunes. This is super important because, and I hound you all so much about the feedback. It's not because I am going against everything we talked about tonight and I just want pats on the back. When you leave feedback on iTunes, when you leave feedback on Stitcher, then it helps our shows to move up in the search engine rankings because people see it as relevant. And if you think that we're relevant, your feedback will help somebody else to find us. And that's why we're doing it. So think of it as less a threat from me and more of a way to be selfless and help somebody else who hasn't yet enjoyed the cool conversations that we have, and let them get on there. Fair enough? Okay. My soapbox is over. I had to get that plug in because I want the reviews. We got a review on iTunes. Thank you to the anonymous abbreviated soul who crossed that threshold so that our iTunes reviews can start to get ratings on iTunes. We needed that. So I appreciate it. And if you want me to mention your name then you got to leave me some feedback. And you can't say from anonymous. I can't say anonymous. So if you want to hear your name on the interwebs, I'll do it. Then give me some feedback. Call and tell me I'm a horrible shill. I don't care. I just like the feedback. That's why I'm doing this show. It's a blast. I mean, look, I got to have my buddy George on here tonight, and we got to talk about faith and science and a lot of other things, which will lead to more conversations, not just with me and George offline, but on this show. So, I like doing this show. So keep giving us some feedback so we can, the feedback I got, one of the best ones was a suggestion for a show. We're going to do it. We're going to talk about Second Amendment and gun rights and also self-defense and protection. It's going to be fun. The show's going to be a blast. Get it? Blast. But we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about our Second Amendment rights as Americans, and even talking about some of our other countries that where our friends live and how the situation is for them. But that's going to be a fun show too. So anyway, my plug. George, I've ranted long enough. I'm giving you the final word. What would you like to close with telling the people?
Well, one of the things that I would like to do is I would like to encourage parents of young people who are getting ready to go to college. Even though they may seem like good Catholics now, that's going to be a trial by fire for them. As Christ said, it's like sending sheep among the wolves. And so one of the things that I think as parents you can do for them is give them a good basis for apologetics, both in books to read. I mean, one wonderful book that they can read, and I forget the exact title. I can give it to you to post, Andy. Is how the Catholic Church created Western civilization. Mm-hmm. And so, there are so many things they could read. For example, I doubt that one person in 1,000 knows that the Big Bang Theory was developed by a Catholic priest. And one of the things that is important, it's as important to address what they don't know as what they do know. And so I would encourage parents to make sure that their children get a good basis in apologetics before they hit the classrooms where they're going to be assaulted.
Yeah.
In
every class.
Right.
Not just the philosophy classes, in everything.
Philosophy, but science, every class, it's the social sciences everywhere, humanities.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's do this then. Let's close with a word of prayer, and then I will kick all of our viewers off to the interwebs to do whatever else you do online, and then we'll be able to catch you all next week. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. God, thank you for tonight, and thank you for George. Thank you for the knowledge and his background and experience in the fields of science, technology, and for what science and technology do for us as human beings. And I pray, God, that we will have a healthy respect and admiration for science, because it can show us so much and reveal so many wonderful and awesome things about how you keep this entire universe in existence. And so we pray that you'll help us to be informed of our faith as well as science and literature and all the other good things that you put here for our use. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good night, everybody, and God bless.
Thanks for having me on, Andy.
Oh, yeah.
Bless, brother.
Thank you for joining us on the Tactical Catholic Podcast, a presentation of the Fiat Ministry Network. Visit us on the web at www.fiatministrynetwork.tv. Good night, and God bless. Stay connected with Fiat Ministry Network. Like us on Facebook. Stay updated at fiatministrynetwork.tv/feed. Follow us on Twitter at Fiat Ministry Net. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Fiat Ministry Network. Fiat Ministry Network, encouraging all to say yes to Jesus Christ.